their own cluster.
So do you want to keep mesh config with the defaults, or do you want to create a new config for the defaults and create basically a proper CRD and do what we discussed in for 2 years to create a CRD for the defaults and for the user configurations?
Yeah, so we pretty much prefer to have CRD for the defaults. The main reason is
Okay.
the mesh config is actually not configurable in our managed Istio environment, where we don't allow user to change mesh config. A lot of, at least most of the field in the mesh config, and the main reason is, because we automatically manage like the control plane update for our user. If they change mesh config,
It will be overwritten.
You have to think out, it could be overwritten, first of all.
Yeah.
Second of all, how do you upgrade the mesh config to the new version, right? If you can't solve that problem, it would overwritten for them. So if we can
I
separate
agree with
out
that.
the admin default out, so they could configure admin default separately, like the outlier detection, timeout, retry, then mesh config could be, for really advanced user, but for normal user, hopefully they don't have to change much.
I'm perfectly happy with this. I mean, let's discuss in environments. I mean, there is a proposal that we are supposed to discuss on the next environment.
Yes.
And let's make it clear that we want to have a new CRD for the defaults, as the document is proposing, basically. And mesh config will be out of the user hands, basically.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah, that's something, we have wanted to see it happen in Istio for a long time. Just
Yeah,
because
everyone wanted
great
that. I mean,
progress.
it's just the problem was that we had values global and a lot of other things, and mesh config was a better place than those because at least it was an API. But I agree, we always wanted to have mesh config and proxy config as proper CRDs, and we already have proxy config. We went that way where it's the annotation, it's kind of a proper exposed API. So I agree. Let's make it a P0 to get this to solve the mesh config problem, basically.
Yeah, and we could start maybe with some of the common configuration first and gradually add more stuff as needed. So
Yeah, the danger is to not transform it into globals.yaml. I mean, this new CRD, we need to be very, very careful because mesh config also kind of went through a lot of random stuff getting added.
yeah, agreed. Yes. So let's rework discuss more detail actually in tomorrow's meeting on that. We need to refine that proposal a little bit more too.
Yeah, I think the main argument is that mesh config was never really user editable because you are right. Almost all the time. I mean, yes, we have ability to change it at runtime and reload it and apply it. But next time the user is going to do an install or any change, it's going to be overwritten and lost. And we had this problem for a very long time. So it's kind of
Yeah.
we need to cut it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, great. I'll make sure I'm at the next meeting and talk about how we can dump out that field and explain it to users. So we've been putting this off for a while, organizing the commands by personas and roles. This document is very preliminary, and I think it is kind of old, but I first for the admins and which commands are for the users. And I think I did this before 1.7 came out. So I've started trying to fix it. Tell me about the Control Z stuff. Users should never see any of that, right? Even on the, is there anything that would run in a user pod that they'd be able to see for Control Z?
Well, the only time I use it is for debugging. Like if I need to turn on certain logs, it's a convenient way.
But that's operator.
Yeah, these would be control plane logs that typically users wouldn't look at, I guess.
That is true. Yes.
So yeah, I think that's what you're implying, that it's mostly an admin It's mostly something for admins. I think that it does belong in this section.
Yep.
Excellent. So install and upgrade if we still have upgrade. Apply is gone.
So by admin, what do you mean by admin? It's sorry, what is admin's operator?
So, these are for essentially the cloud operator or
Cloud operator. Okay.
person in control of the.
So that will be a Google or IBM engineer who is
Istio
maintaining.
system.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
that's a good question. So I think there's really three roles. So one is the cloud operator, like you were saying, Google, right? Operating Istio for your customer. The second role is the platform team, we also call it mesh admin early on, which is the platform owner of the service mesh platform for a particular customer, where they define, the service mesh strategy for the team and onboarding services, like best
So
practice
customer.
for their services. Yeah, within their customer, I think there's two roles. One is the individual service team who run services in the mesh, and then there's also a typical role, we call it like platform owner, who owns the service mesh platform, coordinate with multiple service owner within their organization, and be able to set like best practice for adoption of service mesh, best practice for configuration, tuning for service mesh. So it's like a central admin team, right?
It's familiar. For example, in hosted services, you have the admin. So even if the user is a user and the admin is the one that administers the Istio or whatever, but he's not actually operating and running the service. That's good. I want to make sure we have clear names and separation between them because again, it's a big difference between mesh admin and the service owner. And for example, I don't want the mesh admin to control the upgrades. He may choose that he stays in a particular channel or stable or whatever, because we want to be able to push fixes whenever we need as operator.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Which could be controlled by a cloud provider. So I guess an example, I would say one of Google's customer, Auto Trader, right? Kyle Stoney, did I pronounce his name correct? I would think he's the platform team, right? Because under him, he's probably have like multiple service owner that he work with.
Yes. He's more like operator then. So he has two roles really, because it's also operating the customer for himself. But
I agree. Yeah, but one day if you provide Istio as a service, he would not necessarily be the operator.
Exactly.
He'd be more on the platform team. Yeah. Okay.
And he will not be able to control the mesh version, because if there is a security fix, we'll push the security fix. As long as we guarantee that it's backward compatible, we should be. I mean, operators should be in control of the versions that is running.
Yeah.
So is this breakout I've had here separating the cloud operator from the platform team, from the service operator? Do you think this is the right breakout?
Except the mesh config settings we discussed is a default settings, not mesh config. We want to kill mesh config and leave it for operator. So the new default settings, or new whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, the new settings, hopefully in a CRD, so that we can take care of upgrade problem for a user.
Non-default CRD, yeah. Okay. And I really like the idea of CRD, because then we can also have per namespace. It can be applied per namespace, and we can have proper. You want only these namespace to have analysis enabled, for example.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So now that I've broken this out, Control Z is still just a cloud operator. Install, upgrade. And some of the options that we see here, like the profile stuff, I don't even know how that would apply. Something like turning on the demo profile thing. Do we even want to have profiles still in the future?
I think that probably for most cases they're not going to be all that useful, but we do have some internal use cases that do leverage it actually for managed Istio. So yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that we're still using like empty profile to spin up a customer gateway. So that's a very, very common scenario.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah, we do the same thing. We intentionally separate gateway deployment from sidecar deployment in some of our products. So we need an empty profile for that.
That makes sense. So I jumped ahead. The diff command, which doesn't talk to the cloud at all, it just makes YAML. But users aren't going to have the ability to use that YAML, so hiding it from them makes sense, right?
I think so. Yeah, I don't see users wanting to poke around in unless I mean it's a general purpose diffing tool, so it's not really specific. It just happens to be on the manifest, but you can diff any YAML manifest with it that you want, and it gives you a pretty nice nice YAML diff view, which is not easy to come by.
No, the code is ingenious, and we should separate it off as being a non-Istio thing that we contribute to the community because it's a general diff.
Yeah,
I agree.
I consider that. That may be the way to go because it's just happens to be on the. That's what we initially created it for, but I'm not sure if that's where it belongs.
Okay. So the generate, users don't need to see it because they can't apply it.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, makes sense.
So this promote canary to master has a new name and I forgot what it is, so I can't change it right here. It's the idea of modifying the webhook so that the Istio injected true points to different settings. And this is a user command, I believe, but maybe not. What do we think?
I'm not seeing that command. Is it on the istioctl manifest?
This command hasn't been created yet. And it's
okay.
And it's scheduled for 1.8. I forget what I called it in 1.8, but it's something like a command that. So we have a special annotation for these other control planes, and then we have this special legacy annotation. And I almost don't want to discuss it because we had like a 20-minute conversation last time about should we get rid of it or should we make it easier to point this special label at a particular control plane.
So this is a data plane, right? I would think it's the user then, because the user should be able to put this for each of their services.
That makes sense. So let me put it down here.
I agree. I think if we have this command, and in my opinion, there's still some questions about whether we really need it, or whether it could be that there's some other stuff that we may put in there. Currently, I don't think it does a whole lot, or it would do a whole lot. And an alternative approach to it is just to just change recommendations to stop using the old label. But anyway, I think if we do decide that there is enough under that command that we should create it, then I do think it should be user.
Fair enough. So I'll ask you about these 3 operator commands. Do we still need them? And I assume they're for admins only.
Definitely. Yes, we do need at least the second 2. The first one is something that it was a request. I would like to remove it, but but somebody asked for it, and I don't know if we can just remove it arbitrarily, but it just really doesn't do much other than render the installation template for operator. So for folks that use different installation paths for operator, they use that to be able to inspect and apply the install manifest for operator. So, but anyway, yeah, I think these three are definitely under admin or cloud operator.
Fair enough. So I had jumped ahead and we talked about profile diff and profile dump and profile list. I assume we want to keep, even though we're getting rid of many of these profiles, we're going to keep these features around because they're so handy to keep them all compiled in.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's quite a few places in docs that refer to them. Yeah, I mean, if you have the profile command and you have profiles, then I think these ancillary commands are helpful. So you know, I think they're tied. They're kind of a package deal with profiles in general.
Fair enough. I listed version here. I've put version on both user and admin because I think they both need it. At a previous meeting, we said we wanted to get rid of this post install, which no longer does anything. And pre-check, I think, do we think this is admin only? Do we think that users want something more like what Lynn was talking about in her service mesh con talk, to take a look at your workload and tell you if it's a good workload for Istio? The current pre-check is telling you if your Kubernetes cluster has the right version and memory for Istio control plane. Do we want a pre-check, a data plane pre-check?
Given that the version of Istio may change at any time, and the clusters that are added to Istio may change at any time, I don't know if it's very useful.
I mean the current pre-check, or do you mean a data plane pre-check?
I mean, you have a mesh. You can add clusters because multi-cluster with different versions. The version of IstioD may be upgraded by the operator when they decide to. Pre-check will do what? I mean, when do you run pre-check? Because after you run pre-check, the version of Istio may change. The pre-check will no longer be valid.
You're supposed to run so let's say you wanted to add a cluster to your mesh. This pre-check should say, well, your mesh is on Istio 1.9, so your Kubernetes is too low for that. Please don't add it to your mesh yet. That kind of thing.
And I think same with upgrade. You probably want to run it before upgrade, or actually even incorporate it into upgrade to prevent.
But you cannot do upgrades as a user.
Right. So I think it's an admin command, but I think admin should run it, or it should be embedded somewhere.
Yeah,
I mean,
it takes 5 things.
Do you expect the admin to go over each individual cluster and run manually commands?
Well, we should make it easier for them, but I think the concept is good. I'm not sure if this is the best implementation of it.
Pre-check is pretty clunky and old and deserves more work, but it does return an error level if your cluster is not compatible. So it can be used for scripting. You could put a quad or something on it.
I don't think we are going to have too many scripts and manual commands done as a or at least for Google. I suspect you will not either.
I think the main problem with this command right now is that it's not, like it just got implemented, but it's sort of been forgotten.
Good point. So we'll try to improve it.
Or kill it. I mean, less is more.
I mean, certainly pre-check is not useful for people who manage the service mesh environment, right? But it could be useful for people learning Istio. They can just, run this before they install Istio, because it helps you to check. For instance, we don't support Kubernetes 1.15 and 1.7, at least not.
Does Linkerd has this command?
Oh, I think they have
Yeah,
a
I think
similar
it was.
thing.
We can keep it. Yeah.
I think it was inspired by Linkerd.
Yeah,
Then we
I'm
can keep
pretty
it.
sure they
Then we
have
can
a
keep it.
similar thing.
Yeah.
It's a great concept. I think it just hasn't received attention. You know.
Yeah, actually, I was just going to submit a PR when you run the download istioctl command. We currently tell people to do run verify install. It's actually would be better to run pre-check. Pre-check is actually more useful.
Good point.
It has caught it. I mean, I think it came into existence because we were getting persistent installation issues that were easily identified with this pre-check. So it definitely, I think, has helped to reduce number of issues during installation.
Yeah, and we're supposed to update this command every release.
Right.
It's the version changes. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
So we have a new. We want to make this. So I put everything under workload users, but as was pointed out, we have this idea that there's someone who manages the whole account, and then there's individual service operators who manage a single service or namespace or test, develop. So most of these commands seem to benefit both groups, things like analyze. I think convert ingress is gone. We so if you have any special things to say about these commands, regarding these add-on commands, Grafana, Jaeger, Prometheus, and Zipkin, I had something I wanted to talk to Kostin about with that. So currently these commands work by looking for the demo installations that we do. I was thinking that it would be nice if these commands worked in a different way. If when you are the mesh admin, you install some Prometheus in your own way, and then you want your user to be able to bring up Grafana, that this dashboard Grafana, rather than looking for Istio in the control plane, just there's a URL that it does. And I'm going to make this thing work with a total hack. So I'll just mention this hack to you all now. Currently, this thing looks at Istio system, and the idea is that in the future we'll be able to specify a Grafana URL, and all that it will do is it will open that URL. So that, in a sense, that's stupid because you could just type in something like open food bar Grafana. But the reason it's not going to be stupid is that we now have istioctl settings. So if I do istioctl x config list, all these settings appear. So the idea is that I'm going to make these commands just give you settings so that if you type this in, it could just be a reminder for you. How does that sound?
I'm not a big fan of feature bloat and I would expect most people to never touch istioctl in their life. I mean, normally you do not need to use istioctl. That's kind of a clutch. It's something that it's again, we get too attached to tools and to complexity. A user can put a bookmark in their browser if you want to remember something. Bookmarks exist for this purpose.
You think bookmarks? You think just dump the whole dashboard thing for the add-ons?
I mean, next we're going to add the istioctl mail command because maybe people want to send an email. It's not really. I think it's useful to keep dashboard Grafana to do the port forwarding. If you happen to have Grafana installed in your cluster, istioctl could either search for labels or specify a namespace and do the port forwarding.
So
Because
that's why I came to this idea, Costin. First, I was going to remove it because you told me to, and then I thought, well, it's handy if you have the demo profile installed. But then I thought, well, all of our documentation says type in istioctl dashboard Grafana. We could make that still work with just 2 or 3 lines of code.
But not open URL. I mean, if it's doing a port forward, I think it's useful. If you can add the search for Grafana, I mean, do get namespaces or have a label in the namespace that is running Grafana or some other way to, or put a namespace parameter and do the same thing, because normally I would expect people to install Grafana in a namespace Grafana or some other
I would
namespace.
imagine that they're using Central STOD, so their cloud provider has given them a Grafana that's married to that Central STOD at foo.ibm.com.
Why? I mean, it's not our problem to worry about their graph. I mean, Google has Stackdriver, for example.
Well, I agree. Just the idea is, does it make our documentation and blogs easier if they can know that if you type istioctl dashboard Grafana, you'll get the Grafana hooked up to your Istio, or is that just too much work?
It's too much work and not natural, because again, in a normal company, there is a group that is going to a different group that is going to maintain Grafana. For example, in Google, and I'm pretty sure in Red Hat and all other companies, there is a managed Grafana that is offered, just like managed STOD.
I'm not saying we should have that. I'm saying, is it handy to have a way to have this mesh admin tell everybody who's an operator, maybe we put it in a mesh config CRD that says, here's the URL, just so that this admin can communicate to his teams.
Sure, that will be a different project, not Istio. I mean, it's not Istio's job to keep track of other things. I mean, maybe Kubernetes will have some feature like that, or maybe there is a kubectl described cluster, which actually gives you some URLs like that. If you do describe cluster, you can see some of the things that are installed in Kubernetes with some.
I'm trying to think of ways to make Istio easy, and I often have gotten frustrated not knowing where my Grafana was.
Yeah, one thing Grafana is that typically when it's managed Grafana, you have a username and password, and unfortunately, it's not usually integrated with single sign-on systems, and people have problems. If you go to a URL, I mean, it's not a HTTP URL, it's usually an HTTPS URL, and at least for the ones that I tried, you need to type the username and password that is created in Grafana itself. That's where the complexity lives. And what the tool was doing was, if it's Grafana is running in cluster, you can do the port forward and kind of bypass the Grafana. But unfortunately, that doesn't work very well, so I don't know what to say.
So how about this? I mean, for simple case, people can use this. I think Linkd also have a similar function for this. And then for people already have a link for the cloud providers, don't you have like a property configuration file you added for Central STOD? Maybe what they could do is they indicate their URL in their property file, so the dashboard, the Grafana or Jaeger could open the corresponding URL instead.
Yes, so that's what I want to do. It's like I say, it's a 2 or 3 line change to do what you just said, and it, I think, simplifies things like documentation, so that dashboard Grafana, it would, and you hadn't set this, currently it says no Grafana pods. The new error message would be no Grafana pods. If you have a dedicated Grafana, please add it to this config file. And then you type it, you do that, and then you type it again, and it's just there. It's just a convenience method. It's not.
I mean, given that you don't have username and password, it's useless, because the real problem is what do you type in when Grafana opens? You need the username and password. It's an HTTPS URL and it's authenticated.
Your browser is caching that for you.
Caching from where? I mean, you need to sign up, you need to be added. It's an entire process for that.
Well,
And why? I mean, do we have commands to open Google? I mean, do I go istioctl Google search, opens a browser? I mean, it's not our documentation. Just find your Grafana. You're not stupid. I mean, it's not.
I don't want to die on this hill, Costin. I'm ready to get rid of it. It's just easy to keep, so I wanted to make sure that as a UX group, we decided that there's too much technical debt involved in maintaining this.
And the user will do istioctl help and will see 200 options and then say, oh, wait a minute, just why is Istio doing Grafana management?
Well, so maybe before we have a good conclusion, we can just detect it's not running. We can do it for you. So if people have it running, we can do port forwarding, automatic launch for them as a convenience.
How about creating a Grafana cutl and file a bug Grafana for? So they create a Grafana cutl command and they have, it's their job to maintain whatever is necessary to make Grafana easier to use, not ours. And we say, hey, if Grafana has a Grafana cutl, then use Grafana cutl. Otherwise, that's why we moved Grafana out, so we don't have to maintain it and to deal with it.
Yeah, but this is just open their dashboard. I mean, we already have this command and a lot of people are using it.
Sure, but we are trying to make it easier, not by adding more features and functionalities that don't belong to Istio. If we believe that is such an important feature, Grafana should have a Grafana cutl, and Prometheus should have a Prometheus cutl that opens their own dashboard however they see fit. Why would we maintain tools for Grafana?
Fair enough, Costin. We should stop talking about it now, and unless people change their mind, we can either let this rot and deprecate it, or
Look at, if you really want to keep it, I think the functionality to do a port forward and detecting Grafana is in cluster is not bad.
Yeah, that's all I think we have. I mean, the other service mesh project have it. That's the other thing, and we already have this function.
The reason I wanted to do what Lynn said, which was just to have it open up a URL that's in a config file if it's on a central SUD, is because I thought it'd be more work to change our documentation than to change the code. But I hear you.
Anyway, to put a URL. So if we say, hey, if Grafana is in your cluster, just specify the namespace and we keep doing the port forward.
Okay, and I assume we feel the same way about Jaeger, Prometheus, and Zipkin.
Yes.
Same thing.
Okay, and we had this discussion before, and you were talking about istioctl demo, but I think that's too much work.
Yeah.
So kubeinject. Kubeinject.
That's critical.
Is critical. And the injection pod is in the user's clusters. It's everything should work, right? There's nothing that's moved to central STD.
That's an interesting issue. Right now, the way kubeinject works, it's intended for asynchronous operation for CI/CD driven installations, and it does have an option, a crazy option, to actually go connect to Kubernetes and grab a config map or two. But I don't know if that's something that it's good or we want to preserve, because it kind of it's the opposite of CI/CD. It means you have to have access to a live cluster, and it's tied to a particular cluster, not a generic operation. So,
so is anyone using that config map reading? So you can, when you do kubeinject, you
I hope not.
You pass it in YAML for your injector settings, or it can. I used it when I was sort of debugging auto injection, but then when auto injection and the command line stuff diverged, I think John Howard has recently fixed that. It got to be a real mess. So we could get rid of the config map reading.
I agree.
We could deprecate them. Should we deprecate them?
Yeah. It's more confusing and not very useful, because So by default, and the other problem is how do we simplify a bit? So you have a template, okay, you have one config file, okay, but now there are two config files. There is mesh config and values.yaml, and values is the one that is crazy.
Yeah, it got frustrating when there were 3 different config maps you passed into it.
Now there are 3, yeah. I mean, it's still 3. So we need to make it 2.
Okay, so proxy config and proxy status have had a lot of work recently. Register and deregister have been deprecated. Validate is completely a user command. This experimental post install is being deprecated and removed already. Version we want to keep. The add to mesh and remove from mesh are fairly the same. The security team is redoing the authz command as we speak. I think we talked about this at another meeting. I can't tell you what we said. We're fixing describe.
Create a remote secret seems admin command.
Is
Mesh
it?
operator. Yeah, because it's creating the remote secret to be able to access the remote cluster to read the endpoints and some of the other configuration.
So I was unsure, especially in like a hybrid cloud situation, if when you join clusters to your mesh, if that was something that a mesh admin did who said, you've got a mesh here, I want to add my cluster to it, or if that's something the cloud did. What do you think?
So I would think that's close to like multi-cluster installation. So it would be kind of like the operator sets up the mesh, and they would need to do the create a remote secret.
Maybe both. Mesh admin and operator.
The idea was to be mesh admin adds a cluster to a mesh. Is this the belief? You could use this for both scenarios.
I think so. It will be hard to change otherwise because we read secrets from the config cluster, so that's something where the mesh admin has permissions to.
That's a good point. Yeah, so basically it would be mesh admin say, you know, hey, I want to make this a multi-cluster mesh. And then the mesh operator would make it happen, right? So,
Yeah.
and they could be the same person in some cases.
I guess we are multi-cluster by default because one cluster is running Istio and one cluster is running the config. So we are already multi-cluster. So you add more clusters.
That is true, except that the external Istio actually needs way more permission than create remote secret. Because create remote secret, most of the permission was just read permission. The external Istio needs a whole lot more. So we don't actually use create remote secret for external Istio.
Not for the primary cluster, but for the secondary clusters, I think we can.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Should we be writing a command to either produce the YAML or directly apply the permissions to let this work?
Produce the YAML.
I want to make environments do the work, but I want to help with how it is used.
Yeah, environment is trying to do as little work as possible because less work means fewer features. And move.
Fair enough. Bootstrap, Kiali. Do we? I put dashboard Kiali down here separate. Obviously, if we're getting rid of Grafana, we should get rid of dashboard Kiali. But I didn't know how Kiali would be working in a centralized situation. Doesn't it need special stuff? Like should we? Because Kiali is totally our thing. Can we do things to help the Kiali team to put their stuff into our control plane?
I don't think they depend on the operator. I mean, it's just a regular pod that is running in some namespace. We need to make sure they are not in Istio system. But other than that, they're using the APIs only.
So we should deprecate ours. Currently, this thing brings up a Kiali.
Yeah, they should take care of that, I think. And I wonder if maybe Kiali team should, if they create a dashboard Kiali, maybe they should also create a dashboard Grafana and dashboard Prometheus and so forth. I mean, they are in the business of UI dashboards. Maybe they can have a link from Kiali to Grafana and Prometheus and other things. They already have links, actually. So
I
they
think
need
they
to track
already have. Yeah,
to
they already
Prometheus
have
for sure.
links.
So maybe they
Jaga for
should,
sure too.
yeah, so maybe that's a better solution to just pass, tell Kiali, hey, take over dashboard Kiali and have a Kiali cattle, and that will take care of Grafana, Jagger, and all the other stuff. Since they absolutely need to, it's part of their business to know where Jagger is.
Fair enough. Now, should we divide these commands that we've divided by privilege into two actual binaries, or do we like istioctl doing it all?
Spaghetti. Who doesn't like spaghetti? And
It's a big binary. We don't want to make people download.
I know, I agree. I mean, even Kubernetes split kubectl from.
So, do we want a Istio admin that does all these things?
Well, I don't know. I mean, how much? I mean, our download is pretty fast. For me, it would be harder to actually figure out which one is which and have two binary, unless it takes a long time to download, and we don't have that issue. And I think we are actually separating our chats out of istioctl, so istioctl is going to be smaller, much smaller.
No, but if there are commands that you cannot execute because you're not an operator, what is the point of having istioctl help show you half of commands you cannot use? And second, if you are an operator, you probably know what you're doing. I mean, probably it's not a problem to have Istio admin installed.
So if we want to do something for the next release, that would be easy. What do we think about a subcommand called istioctl istio admin? So we would move all of the commands underneath there. That would clear up what you see when you type istioctl.
Ed, I think that this is actually not a big work item to offer both options actually. I mean, we can decide, but in any case, it's going to be based around the Cobra command framework we already have, and if you have that, then it's a pretty trivial effort to include it into istioctl if we want, or keep it as a separate binary.
Right. The code is trivial. So moving all these commands to have be two places for 1.8 and then move to their final place is easy. The question is, what do the users expect, right? We don't want people to be overwhelmed when they. We don't want users to be overwhelmed when they type istioctl.
Exactly.
To see commands like operator and profile that maybe they can't use. If we could get half of these commands out of here and hide them under istioctl istio admin or istioctl admin, that might help. It would just be moving some things around in the hierarchy.
Right. So I think that part I totally agree with. I think whether we put it under a new subcommand and then require istioctl admin versus having a separate binary, I think that part is pretty easy to implement. The main question is like how do we decide which way to go?
So why Kubernetes is okay to have kubeadmin and kubectl and we are not? I mean, what's different between Kubernetes and us that make us so much more?
I don't think
we would go to that in the future, Costin. I think this is a way to get there slowly. Right now, every user has been installing Istio themselves, so they might be befuddled by two commands.
No. We leave the command as it is because we cannot change backward compatibility, but we add a kubeadmin command that has only the admin commands. And we deprecate and start changing the documentation. And when the documentation is changed, we can stop using. So I'm not saying now do that, but just start a Istio admin, make sure that all the admin commands go into Istio admin.
So what I could do is start producing this Istio admin command with all this stuff. As Martin points out, it's just a couple dozen lines of code. And then we could see what it feels like.
Or maybe the opposite. I mean, maybe start a command, I don't know how to call it, but that has only the user visible commands. So it's a command for someone who doesn't have permissions to the entire thing, just have permission to maybe to the namespace to see how it goes. So it's basically create a tool that is.
I think it's too late because we have 3 years of blog articles about using istioctl to say we have a new name for our
how
user
about
troubleshooting command.
How about another alternative is just we just have one command and the user tell us which one they want to see. I mean, so by default they can see everything, but their admin, or maybe by default they can only see the user command, and then they can configure to see everything, or just the admin.
That would be easy too.
But why Kubernetes didn't do? I mean, if we understand why Kubernetes chose to go this way, and I would be happy to.
Yeah, I mean, kubeadmin wasn't there when kubectl was there. That's my understanding.
I mean, they could have did it. They could have created kubectl admins or kubectl create cluster.
And I think they were created on different team also. So it's not like us. We've been huddled together at the beginning.
So I actually think that it's worth finding the answer to that question, because we may be assuming that they did it after some lengthy deliberation, but it could be that they did it for some completely different reason. And if they went through deliberations, they probably have some good reasons for doing that. And
I can give you an example. I mean, we have JKE in Kubernetes in Google, and that. It's a managed Kubernetes, and that's the job of Google to figure out how to install, and kubeadmin doesn't apply. Same thing with this. I mean, we have in Google, we have traffic director, and we have, kind of other managed Istio that we can run, where the user will not have to have any way to administrate. So that's why I would prefer to have it separate, because kubeadmin will be for people who manage their own Istio, but everyone else will not have the impression that they have the power to do anything there, because they will not,
So I think that Kubernetes and Istio are slightly at different stages of maturity in terms of being a managed offering. I think Kubernetes is much further along, and maybe the balance between sort of users who are both admins and users is greater in the Istio case towards people that are doing everything themselves at this point. I think it's changing, but I'm not sure if we're.
That's how it's changing. I mean, by making it clear that they are two separate. You can have a managed Istio and you can have separate role and you have separate commands, and you are not required to. I mean, even for multi-tenant, we agreed that the API is a line of demarcation, and you should not assume that you are running an Istio to have a tenant.
So I agree that's the end goal, and I believe that's where things will end up. I'm just not sure how far along we are at this stage, and where
yes.
we're actually going to.
If we know that's the end goal, then we should move into that direction and not create additional confusion for the users. That's my point.
Yes. So how about we do this gradually? So istioctl shows the user command by default. Admin can toggle a configuration to see the admin commands, and then over longer term, when we feel admin absolutely needs their own admin cuddle, we can break out if needed.
Yeah, that's not really my concern. I mean, I don't really care about admins because, for example, in Google, probably not use Istio admin at all. My concern is for users who are just using Istio to not be confused by having some commands that have no effect and or worse, who knows what will do.
Right, that's what I'm saying. We just make istioctl just show the user, but then admin could optionally enable something to see the admin commands. Hopefully, there are more users than admin.
I see. So basically, hide them.
Less work.
Okay, so we hide them so from the help and or okay, that may work. But
we have Viper, so we can make it all be hidden by a single environment variable or config file.
Right.
So we went over. Thank you, everybody. Everybody who wants to, please review the PR for supporting type/name instead of pod name in istioctl. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks so much.
okay.
Right.